I recently remembered a really weird and creepy thing that happened back when I was younger many years ago. I was probably about 13 or 14 years old, and I was living at home with my parents. Our house was in this quiet but average neighborhood, and we had a 2-story house. My bedroom was on the second floor towards the front of the house. During this time, I loved playing video games, and I still do. But it was the summertime, so I didn't have school, and I would sometimes just game all night. So one time when I was staying up all night playing video games, I was the only one awake in the house. My parents and sister were long asleep in their rooms. I remember that it was really quiet, but at one point, I heard the sound of a louder vehicle moving in the distance down the street. I happened to just be kind of sitting by the window anyways, so I paused my game and looked out. When I did, I saw just the front part of a semi-truck coming down our street at a slow rate of speed. So it was just the tractor and no trailer. The road curves, so I saw it turning the corner and then going on the straightaway that our house was on. My bedroom light was off, and my window was mostly covered, but I could see pretty well. The truck had no trailer, but it still made a much louder noise than the average car. I watched it slowly drive down the street and towards our house. I had never seen a truck like this on our street before. I wasn't sure if someone who lived here drove a truck or what, but it was unusual, so for that reason I continued to watch it. The truck seemed to only go slower as it approached our house. Then when it got to about even with the front yard, it surprisingly stopped. I got a tad bit nervous because this was really weird. I could not see at all who was driving. Then the truck started to reverse. It backed up very slowly and pulled over to the side of the street. Now, it was not directly in front of our house, but it was on the side of the road and between our house and the next door neighbors, and it was on our side of the street. I didn't think that the neighbors had a truck or anything like that, but maybe it was someone that they knew or something. After the truck stopped, it just sat there for over a minute. Nobody got out of it in that time. I thought that it might just be a guy driving a truck who was looking for a place to sleep. However, after maybe another minute or so, I saw the door open. When it did, a man stepped out. I didn't recognize him. I also really didn't see him that well, as it was very dark out, and from my angle being up, I couldn't really see his face. So the man then started walking into the grass and then into our yard. I kept watching, and my heart was now racing. The man walked right up to the house and then stopped at a window. He then appeared to look inside. I was pretty much shocked and didn't know what to do. The man looked through the window with his hands up against it for like 30 seconds probably. I thought that he was going to break in. But then the man backed up and moved away from the window. He then walked back through the yard and returned to his truck. Then he got inside, and probably 30 seconds later, he drove away. I kept watching the street for a while, but he didn't come back. The whole thing left me very confused. But after that night, I never saw him again. I'm still not sure what to make of it. Maybe he was thinking about breaking in or something like that. But why would he drive there in a semi-tractor like that? It seemed really weird. When I went to college, I had some close friends, and I would meet them at a bar during the weekends, and it was a good time. I will say I'm tall and in good shape, so some girls find me attractive. This one specific girl, an encounter, made me stop partying, and I changed my drinking habits. I live in the dorms, so I have a roommate who I'm close to, but every weekend he leaves to see his family, so I rarely see him on the weekends. One Saturday night when I got invited out to the bars again that weekend, it was an easy decision since I was bored and in my dorm room alone. Once I got to the bar, I drank a few beers and did some shots, but overall I was having a good time. I met this girl named Anna. She was attractive, had hazel eyes and blonde hair, and was the same age as me. We talked for hours until I started to feel dizzy. I decided it was time to go, and I left. I was picked up by an Uber, but before getting into the car, I saw Anna getting into her car. I thought she was heading home as well since I had left the bar, and we talked for a while that night. Maybe she thought it was time to go too. I came back to my dorm and I went to bed with my clothes on. It was 1:45 a.m. when I went to sleep. I woke up to a breeze in my room and it was freezing inside. I went out of my room and saw that my dorm door was open. I checked outside but didn't see anyone except for the light in the hallway. I closed the door and called out to my roommate, thinking that he had come back in the middle of the night. There was no answer. I was still a bit drunk, so I thought that maybe I had left the door open when I came in. I checked the time and saw that it was somewhere around 2:10 a.m. That's when I heard it. I froze when I heard the breathing of a man. The room wasn't that dark since I had a nightlight for when I woke up to get a glass of water. The breathing sound was coming from the other room where my roommate sleeps. I went in, and when I turned on the light, I saw Anna and a guy who was around 200 pounds as well as taller than me. I yelled and ran off, alerting the security guard. The police were called and they were both arrested. It turns out that Anna left at the exact same time as I did, but obviously she had followed my Uber to my dorm. When I went into my dorm room, I didn't lock the door, so the 200-pound guy came in with Anna to rob our dorm room, or at least that's what I'm hoping they were there for. I can't believe the luck I had with this that I woke up so soon after I went to bed, and both of the intruders actually managed to get caught. I want to share a creepy thing that happened a few years ago. I still don't quite know what happened or how to explain it. But basically, I live alone and I have a smaller house a little bit out in the country. That's how I'm able to afford it, because it's pretty far out and not in a very populated area. There's more land here, although my yard is not very big. But the places around here are a little bit cheaper and it's very quiet. The street really only gets traffic of people who live here. The properties are also kind of far apart from each other and it's peaceful. So one night there was a guy walking down our street that I didn't recognize. I just happened to notice him. It was later at night and he just walked by my house down the street. It seemed slightly odd, but I didn't pay it that much attention. It was just something that I happened to notice. I was just walking past the window and saw it. As I was in my living room though, I noticed something out the window out of the corner of my eye about 20 minutes later. It was the guy walking back down the street again, the same guy. He walked past in the other direction and then was out of sight. For the rest of that night, I didn't see him or anything. I bring this up because the very next night I saw him again. I noticed him walking down the same way as before, and then like 10 minutes later, I saw him again. It was kind of suspicious to me though, because like I said, it's a very quiet neighborhood in almost the middle of nowhere. There were no sidewalks, and not really a reason to come to this neighborhood if you didn't live here. And I didn't recognize this guy at all, and I knew all the people who lived around me. So this was strange. And also, the way the guy walked didn't seem like someone who was just out for a walk or getting exercise. It was almost like he was looking around, and it just gave me a bad feeling. And when you combine that with the fact that it was like 10 o'clock at night, it certainly seemed strange. Still, I wasn't going to call the cops or anything. I'm sure there could be a number of actually logical explanations, and just walking down a street is not a crime at all. But it was something to keep my eye on. So I glanced over to the window more than usual the rest of the night, and I saw him again maybe a half hour later. Once more, he just walked by. It was strange. I didn't see him for the final hour or so that I was awake. Then I went to bed. Now, my house is just one level, and my bedroom is at the back of the house at one corner. I went to sleep that night, but I awoke randomly in the night. I just remember that I groggily woke up and turned over to go back to sleep. Before I closed my eyes though, I was facing my bedroom window and looking towards it. It looked out to the backyard, and things were normal. But then, seconds later, I saw someone come into view. It was that same guy. He walked past the window and was maybe 10 or 20 feet away from it, in my backyard. He didn't look over, and just continued walking and was quickly out of sight. I saw him for a total of maybe 5 seconds, but I know it was him. When I did, I was extremely confused and also creeped out. I laid there for like 10 seconds trying to make sense of it before I got up. It didn't help that I had just woken up. By the time I got over to the window, he was gone and out of my sight completely. I went around to every window in the house and looked, but did not see him. He was gone. So then I went back to bed. After that, I never saw him again. I still don't know what happened there. Who was that guy, and why did he walk through my yard at night? I'm certain that I was awake and not dreaming it. It's just a really weird thing though. I used to work at a small coffee shop when I was younger. I would work both opening shifts and closing shifts as we were open until nighttime. The shop was located in the city and was in a pretty good spot. It was surrounded by sidewalks, streets, and other buildings. After I worked there for some time, I actually started closing the shop a decent amount. When this happened, I would lock the doors, but then have a number of tasks to do. And typically, I would be all by myself to do them. One night, I found myself closing again. My coworkers left, and I was by myself to lock up and do the finishing tasks. By now, it was completely dark outside. Things had been very quiet for the last hour or so that we were open, as they typically were. After I had locked the doors, I began doing some cleaning and reorganizing and then preparation for when we would open the following morning. Overall, the things that I had to do would take anywhere from about 30 minutes to maybe even an hour. So I remember that I took the main garbage from behind the counter, which would get very full fast. I took it through the back hallway, and there we had a back door which would lead to outside where the dumpsters were. But being in the city, the doors actually opened up to this alleyway, and the dumpsters were up against the building to the left of the doors. I remember that I opened up the back door and took the trash out to the dumpster. When I was back there, I actually noticed that there was a car that was just sitting there in the alley a ways away. It appeared to be running, and I did not know who that would be or why they would be in the alley like that. I could tell that at least one person was in the car. It looked like multiple, but I could not tell any details of what the people looked like or anything. It instantly struck me as suspicious. After tossing the trash, I quickly went back inside and locked the back door behind me. I went to continue my tasks, but maybe like 1 or 2 minutes after I got inside, I heard someone try to open the back door. I instantly was extremely nervous, and I felt like my suspicions had all come true. Why would somebody be trying to enter the back door? It was likely whoever was in that car. To be clear, in the back alley it was an unmarked door to the coffee shop. There was no way that somebody would mistake that for an entrance. This seemed like someone potentially looking to break in. I knew the door was locked there, and it was a pretty strong door with no windows in it or nearby. So I went to the front and made sure that the doors there were locked again, which they were. I looked around out there through the windows, but things were fine out front. So I then debated what I should do. Should I call the cops? I didn't know if I should be on the safe side and do so, or wait to see what would happen. Since the one time they had tried opening the door, I hadn't heard anything. Maybe they left. I decided to just continue with my tasks. Over the next 20 minutes or so, I did more work, and did not hear anything else. I even looked out the front windows a few times, which were nowhere near the alley, but I never saw anything there. So then, after almost finishing everything, I had to take out the trash again. The trash from the rest of the shop would be taken out each night after closing, as well as the kitchen trash. So I needed to go back in the alleyway. As I approached the back door, I was nervous, but I hadn't heard anything for over 20 minutes. And that was probably just a one-time thing. It was just once that the person tried entering, so I decided to just do it. I opened the back door, and as soon as I did, I instantly saw 2 guys standing really close to the doors. I think the door only opened like 3 feet before I quickly pulled it back and closed it. As it was closing, I saw the guys approaching the door. They had been only about 10 feet away from it, maybe less, and were quickly getting closer. But I slammed it shut and locked it, only to hear them arrive at the door and try opening it right after. At that point, I got out my phone and called 911. I told the operator what was going on, but no longer heard the men trying to open the door. I locked myself in the bathroom and waited. The police arrived pretty quick. It was probably only about 2 or 3 minutes later. Unfortunately, the guys were gone. I told the cops what I could, but I didn't have the best information. I only sort of saw their faces, but didn't have great details as it was nighttime, and I saw them for just like a second. So it was pretty basic information. And then the car was the same thing. I didn't get a license plate or even know the exact make and model, just the basic details. So overall, the police said they would do what they could, but I didn't know if they had enough to go on. After that, I left and went home. I was really nervous after that, working there for a while, and we always had 2 people closing for the next few months. But nothing like that ever happened again. I don't know that those guys were ever found either. I was really surprised the guys waited by the door for so long. It was like they knew I would be taking out more trash in the back alley. It makes me wonder if they'd watched before or something. But I'm just glad that I saw them when I did and closed the door so quickly. I live by myself in this kind of older, not so nice apartment. It's a building that has units on a bottom floor and a top floor. Mine is on the bottom, and my door opens up to the outside. In front of the building is a parking lot, and to the side and back there's kind of a grassy area and some trees. That connects to a neighborhood next door. And my building really isn't that big. There's maybe 20 or 30 apartments in it total. So anyways, a couple of months ago I was at home by myself. Normally I would just be playing video games in my room or something like that. I think that's what I was doing on this night, and I remember that it was probably close to midnight and my cell phone started ringing. I looked at it and saw that the number was from my area code, but I didn't recognize it. I didn't know who it would be, but I decided to answer. Based on the fact that it was a local number, I figured it wasn't a scam call. Plus, it was late at night, which is unusual to get a call at that time. When I answered, I heard the voice of what sounded like a young woman. She said, "Can you come outside?" I asked who was calling because I didn't recognize her voice. She didn't say. Instead, she just repeated herself, asking for me to come outside. I asked what she needed and if she was okay. Based on the tone of her voice, she sounded borderline desperate and sad. She still didn't answer me. She told me to come outside again. I asked her where she was, but she wouldn't say anything else. She just kept repeating herself. This random call out of the blue was making me feel really weirded out. I was trying to figure out what the situation was. This woman was not giving me any information other than just telling me to come outside over and over again. But then she stopped saying anything. I was still asking her to give me more information, but there was nothing on the other end. She didn't hang up, but I didn't know what she wanted. I just heard silence on the other end of the phone. So I got up and went to my windows and looked out, but I didn't see her or anyone. Around the apartment building, it would get pretty dark and quiet at night. Because the road off the building was a rather quiet one, and the grass area surrounding it didn't get much activity being by a neighborhood, I decided that I would go outside. I asked again if she was there, but she still didn't answer me, so I hung up the phone. I went to my door and walked outside. When I got out there, it was completely silent. The only reason I was going out there was because I thought maybe the woman needed help. But why wouldn't she answer me? I took a few steps out and looked around. Then I walked towards the side of the building by the grassy area. Still, there was nothing. I was looking around, wondering if she was over there. When I got almost near the back of the building, I heard a noise. Someone was there, but they were out of my sight. I stopped because I just had a bad feeling. I called out asking who was there, but I got no response, so I didn't go any closer. Just then, I heard the sudden sound of at least 2 people walking. They were behind the building, and it sounded like they were heading somewhere quick. I can't say for certain if they were walking in my direction, but my instincts just told me to get out of there, so I did. I quickly jogged back around to the front of the building and then went back in my place. I looked out of my front window, but nobody came around. And literally like 30 seconds after getting back inside, my phone rang again. It was the same number, and I answered it. The same woman once more started telling me to go outside again. This seemed fishy to me now. I tried to get her to tell me anything. I asked her where she was, who she was, and why she was calling me. But the only thing she would say was, "Can you come outside?" So finally, I said that I was calling the police. At that point, she stopped talking and hung up. After that, I contemplated actually calling the cops, because the fact that she hung up when I mentioned it seemed sketchy. But I figured that if the police came out there, they wouldn't find anything. I'm sure if this was some kind of a setup or a trap, the people would be long gone by then. So I just looked out of my windows for a few more minutes and then went back to what I was doing. Nothing ever came of it. I'm not sure if it was some kind of a setup or what. The biggest mystery to me, though, is how this woman got my number and who she was, because I really don't know. I drive a delivery truck around the city where I live. I mostly make deliveries to businesses all across town, and in some neighboring cities as well. For me, I will often work at night, which has its ups and downs. One of the nice things is there's less traffic to deal with generally, but it also led to one of the scariest moments that I've had on the job. It was nighttime, pretty late, and I had a delivery to a local business that had recently closed for the night. I had delivered there before. It was located in a little bit quieter part of town and was located in a sort of strip mall. But by now, all or most of the businesses were closed over there, so it was a large parking lot with just a few vehicles in it. I would typically just park out front and make the delivery to the front door, seeing as they were closed. This time, I parked out front and then stopped. But before I could get out, I saw this guy come walking up to my driver's door. He motioned for me to go around back and said that they needed the delivery in the back of the building this time. I didn't think much of it and just said okay. So I drove my truck forward, turned it around, and then started going to the back of the building. This strip mall parking lot had a narrow road that went from the side of the building around to the back of it. Back there, it was much quieter, had some delivery areas, and bordered a woods. With the fact that some of the businesses there would take deliveries around back, I did not think that it was weird. but I had never had to go around back there when I delivered to that company before. I drove around, and when I got to the back area, it was really dark. There was literally nothing and no one other than some dumpsters. But then there was one SUV that was randomly parked there, and it looked like it was running. I thought it was kind of strange, but I didn't really give it that much thought. I wasn't exactly sure where the business was that I was delivering to, so I was trying to focus on that, because I had never been to that spot before. Plus, they did not have signs in the back for what they were. I slowly drove to where I thought it would be. When I was figuring that out, my cell phone rang. It was the same business that I was delivering to. I answered, and a guy asked me why I left. I told him that I was instructed to deliver around back. He told me no, and asked who told me that. This whole situation was now feeling sketchy to me. I backed up my truck to now move back to the front. When I did, I saw the guy walking around who had told me to go around back. He saw me backing up and signaled for me to stop. I yelled at him saying that I was on the phone with them and they were saying to go to the front. The guy then told me no and to hang up. This did not seem right. I drove out of there and back around the building to the front. A guy who I had seen before when I had delivered there came out of the building from the front door and walked over to me. Then I made the delivery as usual. Meanwhile, the other guy was nowhere in sight. As I was doing the delivery, I saw the SUV that I had seen in the back drive out and leave. It made me think that that could have been a setup. The one guy who had talked to me didn't even work at the business. Maybe he and the guys in the SUV wanted to rob me or something. I don't know for sure, but it's a pretty reasonable guess. After that, I didn't see them again. I delivered a few more times to that business, and nothing like that happened. Looking back, I'm really glad that the owner called me when he did. If not, who knows what could have happened. This took place the day after I took my last final for college. From the beginning, I was so nervous that I was going to fail this one class and was not going to be able to receive my degree, as this was my last semester. Later in the day, I was out at the pool at my apartment complex with some friends and my roommates, when I checked my phone and saw that I passed my class. I got so excited and I told everyone we were celebrating because I was the last one to have a final. It was 3 days before I got to walk and graduate with this degree that I decided we should have some fun before we all went our separate ways. As the night wore on, we decided not to go out and stay in. We invited a couple more people over and went on with the night. Around 2 in the morning, people started leaving to head to bed, and the only people left were my 2 roommates, both people they were dating, and one other friend. We were still messing around, and because our apartment was on the first floor and next to the pool, we went to go night swimming. As soon as we were done with that, I was ready to just hang out and be in for good for the night. My roommates and the other friend all left to go somewhere else for a little while, which was fine. It was nothing out of the ordinary for me to be at home alone. I got some food and went to my room to hang out until they got back. The way my room is set up in our apartment is it's all the way in the back, farthest away from the front door and the patio door. My room is behind the kitchen, and you'd have to walk through the whole apartment to go there. Because our apartment was at the front of the complex and near the pool, we were near the front gate. At the time, the gate was left open because it was broken. My room has one large window, and you could see easily into my room if I didn't have the blinds or curtains shut. So, while I was waiting for my friends to get back, I fell asleep, and the last time I looked at the clock, it was 3:30 in the morning. Also, I'm pretty sure my bedroom light was on when I fell asleep. The next time I woke up, it was 5:30, and there were flashes going off. It was like I had a strobe light going off in the corner of my room, and I woke up really confused and thought that it was my friends coming back to mess with me. Once my eyes got more adjusted because the room was now dark, I realized that it was in fact not my friends messing with me, but a man who was at least 6'1", wearing a green hoodie with the hood up in the corner of my room. He was by my closet holding my phone and taking pictures of me. I don't think he realized I'd woken up, and when reality sunk in, I yelled out. Instead of coming at me or running out of my room, the man put the phone down and walked out of my room, not saying anything, not in a panic, and just walked like normal. I ran after him saying, "Hey," after I got myself up out of bed. I tried to follow him out, but once I got to the front door, I didn't see him anywhere. So I ran back inside and woke up all my roommates, asking if they were messing with me, and then I called the police. I looked around my room and saw the only thing missing was my laptop, and it had been at the desk in the far corner of my room. The weirdest part about that was the fact that my laptop was in the farthest part of my room with the door closed, and outside on the kitchen counter were 3 other MacBook laptops, 2 wallets, and at least a $300 speaker. but the only thing missing from the whole apartment was my laptop. Later on, I found out that the front door and the patio door were never locked when everybody got back, and the police could not find the guy or my computer. What made things worse was that the SIM disk from my camera was in the computer, so all my personal photos from that camera were now accessible to the guy. Some things I saw a couple days later while I was getting ready to move freaked me out even more. I had a very distinct and different kind of tapestry in my room. It had 2 wolves howling up at the moon and is all black and white. One day when I was packing my car, I happened to look up when it started to get dark out, and as I looked up, I glanced in the apartment above mine. Through the blinds on the wall was the exact same tapestry as the one that was in my room. What creeped me out even more was the fact that there were purple string lights just as in my room as well. As if I wasn't creeped out enough yet, an all-black cat came up to the window, and I started to feel weird because the year before I had a baby kitten that was all black. In the end, the guy who was in my room was never found, and I never saw his face, which freaks me out to this day, and I hope that I never come across him again. I never got my laptop back, and I never found my SIM disk to my camera. I'm not sure to this day if it was an opportunistic break-in attempt by a creep, or if it was something more serious like a long-term stalker. I'm just glad I graduated and moved out of that room and complex now. I live alone in my apartment, which I have had for several years. Not long ago, something creepy happened. I was at home by myself, and it was nighttime. Out of nowhere, I heard several really loud noises coming from above me. I live on the 3rd floor, and there are 4 floors in the building, so this had to be coming from my upstairs neighbor. But prior to that, I never remember hearing any loud noises coming from upstairs or anything along those lines. And these noises were super loud. It was like whoever was up there was jumping up and down and stomping on the floor as hard as they possibly could. I was confused. These noises went on for maybe 30 seconds or so, on and off. I didn't know why that would be happening, but when it stopped, I figured that it was just a one-time thing. However, that was not the only loud noise I heard that night, because roughly 10 minutes or so after the loud noises from upstairs, I heard a few very loud bangs on my apartment front door. But it was not quite a knock, more of a banging. It was like someone was hitting the door with the side of their fist rather than the knuckle so they could hit it harder. But whatever they were doing, they were going at it with about the same amount of force as the upstairs stomping. So right away I thought to myself, is this the same person? I didn't know what the meaning of it was. I got up to walk to the door, but the banging on it didn't last long and had stopped by the time I was halfway there. When I looked out the peephole, there was no one. I opened the door and looked around in the hallway and still saw no one. But I was curious as to what was going on. I thought to myself I had somehow made my neighbor angry. Maybe this was their revenge. But I didn't have any loud music or loud TV. I hadn't had people over or been loud in any way. I really could not think of a reason for it. I decided to investigate though. So I went upstairs and I located the apartment that was right directly above mine, which I was able to confirm. Then I knocked on the door. I could ask whoever lived there if they had knocked on my door and why. After knocking, there was no answer though, so I knocked again. This time, I heard movement inside the apartment. I was nervous, and about 10 or 20 seconds later, the door opened. A woman stood there, and she asked me what I wanted. She was like rubbing her eyes and yawning like she was really tired. I asked her if she had just knocked on my door, and asked if she had stomped on the floor as well. She said no, and claimed that she was sleeping and I had just woken her up. Now, mind you, this was probably like 5 minutes after the noises, so I knew that she had to be lying. I asked if anybody else lived in that apartment, and she said no, but then she said that was none of my business. I told her again that I was sure the noises came from her apartment, and she said no, I was mistaken, and then she shut the door in my face. I went back to my apartment, now suspicious and also confused. I didn't believe the woman. I knew the sound came from her apartment, but I had never even seen her before and didn't know why she would do that. I went back to my apartment then. There were no more strange noises that night or anything. I double-checked again to make sure that that apartment was directly above mine, and I was right. I tried to just move on and forget it at that point. As long as nothing like that happened again, it would be fine. But that wasn't the end of things. It was probably a week or so after the first incident. It was nighttime once more, and I was at home. My apartment was at the front of the building. It overlooked the parking lot and drive that went to another road as well as some grass. I suddenly heard the sound of something hitting my window. This was the window that was sliding glass and had my balcony on the other side. It was completely covered, and so I looked over but obviously couldn't see anything. Before I knew it, something else hit it. I wasn't quite sure what it was, so I went over and opened the blinds. When I did, I saw nothing. But then I saw what looked like a rock come flying up and hit my window. From where I was, the balcony blocked the view of the ground directly below. I got even closer and looked, and just barely saw what looked like the woman that lived above me. She was down outside the apartment building, and she quickly moved forward so that she was now out of my sight. No more rocks came flying towards me. So I opened the door and went out onto the balcony, but the woman had gone in the building, it seemed, because she was now gone. I yelled, asking who did that, but got no answer. And I noticed that a couple of small rocks were actually on my balcony. Thankfully, there was no damage to the window. I could not believe it. What was this woman's problem with me? Then, one other time, just a few days after this, I heard a few more random stomps coming from upstairs, and they were really loud. It was late at night once again, but I didn't bother to go upstairs and confront her. I was confused and wondering why I was getting this bad treatment from the neighbor upstairs. But then, about a week after the rock throwing incident, and this was now a couple of months ago, I heard noises outside. It sounded like people arguing. I looked out the window and saw that same woman. She was walking out holding boxes and stuff and bringing it to her car. There was a cop there and someone who worked at the apartment. She was yelling at them, but it also looked like she was moving her stuff out of the apartment. I came to the conclusion that she had been evicted. The cops just seemed to be making sure that she was actually leaving. After like an hour of hearing her on and off loudly complaining as she went back and forth to her car, she drove away. I haven't seen her since, as she obviously no longer lives here. I still don't know why she got evicted or what her problem with me was. After she was gone, I reported the rock throwing incident. I didn't at the time because I figured it would just lead to an argument, as I didn't have proof that it was her though, and I just saw her down there. She probably would have then come after me even worse. But I'm glad she's gone now. It's still just a mystery to me of why. Last year something really weird happened that kind of creeps me out. I travel a decent amount for work. Probably about once a month, maybe a little less than that, I go to another city for a few days with some colleagues. On this one occasion, we flew to a city that I had never personally been to before yet. We arrived in the city in the evening and checked into the hotel and stuff. When the story really starts is the following morning, which was our first full day in town. We were staying in the city, and so the morning before work, I left the hotel and walked a few blocks down to a Starbucks coffee. It was a pretty short distance and was just on the corner. So I went inside and I got up to the counter and I ordered my normal coffee order that I get there. There were several employees working, and it wasn't that busy, but there were a few other people around. I remember that when my drink was done and my name was called, I went to pick it up, and oftentimes they write your name on the cup. Well, I just took it and left, but when I was outside, I noticed on the cup that they had my full name, first and last, and I hadn't told them that. It seemed really weird, because I had not been to this city before and didn't know anybody there. I had told them my first name, but not my last name. How would they know that? I was really weirded out by this strange thing, but after that I had to go to work, so I pretty much forgot about it. The following morning I returned to the same Starbucks. It's kind of a routine for me, I guess. I like my coffee order there, and I know exactly how they're probably going to make it. And Starbucks are pretty much everywhere, so it's easy to be consistent with it. I arrived at the Starbucks at probably about the same time as the previous day. I wasn't thinking about the previous day, how they knew my first and last name. But when I went to the counter to order, I made a little small talk with the guy taking my order, and it was the same guy who was there the previous day. Then another guy who was working there and making the drinks looked over and saw me. He walked over as I was paying, and he said, "So how long are you in town for?" I looked up from the card reader as my credit card was there, and I saw the guy looking at me. Confused, I just said, just a couple of days." He nodded and then turned away. A few moments later, my coffee was done again. This time it had just my first name on it. I took it and left again, but it just seemed odd. Maybe they could tell that I was from out of town. I'm not sure how, but maybe. But that still didn't explain how they knew my full name. I thought maybe with my credit card it showed it somehow or something like that. I really don't know, but regardless, I was just feeling that that particular Starbucks was odd. It made me want to go elsewhere to get coffee the next day. So the following morning, I did. I purposely went out of my way and found a small little coffee shop that I had never seen before, and I went there. Admittedly, I did not like that coffee there as much, but at least it was normal and they didn't guess my full name or anything. So that was our last full day in town for work. The next morning we would be flying out. Prior to departing for the airport though, I had to get my morning coffee, so I walked to the Starbucks again. This time when I entered, I walked up to the counter and the same two guys were working among several other employees. When I went up to order, they asked me where I was the previous day. I said sorry, I went to another place. They were joking around and acting sad, but in reality I was wondering how they acted like they knew me for so long. I get just being friendly, but this was a little bit strange. I ordered and then mentioned that I was leaving that day. I didn't say where I was going, but they mentioned the city I lived in and asked if I was going back there. I said yes, but this time I asked them how they knew where I was from. The guy just shrugged. I said, no, seriously, how did you guys know my full name and how do you know where I live? He said, why wouldn't we? This answer did not satisfy me. In fact, it only creeped me out. I said, no, really, I'm so confused. That's when the guy's attitude changed from joking to almost serious. He then said, we're really busy, I need to get back to work. Then he just turned away and started making another coffee, ignoring me. I left and walked out, wondering how they knew me still. We flew back, and I haven't been back to that city since then, and I'm still confused about how they knew all that stuff. It really creeps me out, to be honest, especially how when I pressed him for more info, he clammed up and got all serious. If anybody knows or has a good idea, maybe they can leave a comment, and I'll be sure to read them if my story gets published, but I'm still confused as to what exactly happened there. A couple of years ago, I used to work at a store that was in town. During this time, I lived in an apartment building that was only like a mile down the road, so I would often walk to and from work every day, which was not too bad. Most of the time that I worked, I would get off pretty late at night. I would take this one sidewalk along a road that was busy during the day, but much more quiet at night. Then I would turn and go a block down or so before arriving at my apartment. One time when I worked, I got off at about 11 o'clock p.m. I left work and then was going to walk home again like normal. Most of the time when going home, I would not see anybody else. Occasionally, I would encounter one or two people maybe, but it was never a big deal. Obviously, this late at night, things were quiet. So I walked along the sidewalk for probably more than half a mile. The road was to my right, and to my left, at this stretch of the road, was a small neighborhood of townhouses. Coming up on the left was a stretch of woods, and then they had trees in the small space of grass between the sidewalk and the road. It was dark, but every so often there was a street light. So as I continued, I was looking at my phone for a couple minutes. I looked up and I noticed up ahead there was now a man just standing in the middle of the sidewalk facing me. He was a really long ways up though, probably several hundred feet. I couldn't make out much about him other than that he was just standing there in my direction. As I continued to walk towards him, I started to get a bad feeling about it. Why was he just standing there in the middle of the sidewalk, not moving and looking at me? He didn't wave or anything, and he wasn't on his phone or doing anything like that. I thought for a second that maybe he was at a bus stop, but the further I looked up there and the closer I got, I realized that it was not a bus stop or even that close to one. I considered for a second about turning around and just walking away, but I told myself not to. I was tired and wanted to go home, and I figured that it was nothing. Soon I was probably within 100 feet of the guy. I was getting more and more nervous, but at that point the man then turned and started walking off the sidewalk, but he was heading into the woods. It was strange because there was no path there or anything like that. This was just a really dense spot with tall grass, bushes, and many trees. I really didn't know what he was doing, but I had a small sigh of relief from him just getting out of my way, so I continued. Still, with the guy now someplace in the woods, this didn't make it seem any less weird. It really seemed even more weird now. For the first few seconds that he walked into the woods, I sort of heard the trees and stuff moving from him walking in there, but as he was farther away, and once he really got in there, I stopped hearing anything, and obviously I couldn't see him. Soon I approached the spot where he went into the woods. I was nervous that he could jump out or something. When I got to the spot, I walked faster, and I also went slightly off the sidewalk and into the grass by the road. I glanced over and didn't see or hear anything. This made me feel better, and I kept quickly walking back home. For the next 50 feet or so, I glanced over my shoulder a few times just to make sure that he didn't come out of the woods, and he didn't. So now I was more than halfway back, and I just had to walk farther down the sidewalk. About 5 minutes later or so, I had finally reached the corner where I would turn, and then my apartment was just across the street. So I was like 25 feet from the corner, and for whatever reason, I looked behind me. When I did, I saw the same guy. He was now on the sidewalk a long ways back, but jogging in my direction. And he was jogging in this weird way where he had really long strides, and he was pretty fast. My heart started racing instantly. I quickly walked faster and made it around the corner. The bushes there at the edge of the business property on the corner would make it so that the guy couldn't see me until he got to the corner. So then I started sprinting. I went a short ways and didn't even bother to get to the crosswalk. There were no cars on the street at that moment, so I just sprinted across the street and then got to my apartment building. I didn't bother to look back, and I made it to the door and went inside. Then I went up to my apartment on the second floor of the building, and I felt safe again. My windows were covered, and I didn't bother to look out of them. I knew that I was safe now, and I didn't even know if the guy knew where I went or if he had stopped following me. I assumed that he did, but I was creeped out from the experience. So I stayed up for maybe another hour or so, and then I went to bed. I got into my bedroom and turned out all the lights. My apartment just happened to be at the front of the building on the second floor, like right above and to the left the main front door of the building. So sometimes in the morning or even late at night, I would hear people coming and going, but it was never a big deal, and it wasn't too loud. That night, as I laid in bed, I heard the sound of someone knocking loudly on the front door to the apartment. At first, I thought nothing of it, but then it happened again. I was curious, so I got out of bed and went to my window. When I looked, I saw the same man. He was knocking on the door to try to get in. And literally a second after I saw him, he looked up right at me. I quickly closed the blinds again and then ducked down, but the guy stopped knocking. I laid there on the floor, too freaked out to move for a few minutes. After a short time, I carefully went to the window again. The man was now gone. I hadn't heard the door open, so I didn't think he got in, but I was really freaked out now. I went to my front door and double-checked that it was locked. Then I tried to watch TV to relax and told myself that it was fine. Eventually, I was able to fall asleep, but I decided to stop walking home at night. For several weeks after that, I was able to get rides home from coworkers because I lived so close and it wasn't a problem for them. I never saw that guy again. I don't live in that building anymore, but the whole experience still freaks me out to remember it. That guy must have followed me, and then he was still at the building like an hour later. I will never forget seeing him jogging towards me or seeing him look up at me in my apartment. I used to drive a semi-truck years ago, and it was a job that I had for a while. I still drive trucks, but not semis, and it's a completely different schedule for me now. But anyways, probably my scariest memory from driving a semi took place in my last year on the job. It was nighttime and I was driving on the highway. I don't even remember what state I was in, but it was pretty late at night and I would be pulling off to get some sleep soon. There were a number of truck stops on this highway, but by now it was getting close to midnight. I knew where I was planning to stop for the night, and it was maybe 30 minutes to an hour up the road. By this point, there were not many other vehicles out at all. As I drove in the right lane, I was going around the speed limit of 70 miles per hour. I remember that a car appeared behind me, went into the left lane, and then passed me. It then went in front of me to the right lane. But after going in front of me, the car then started to slow down a little bit. If I was going 70, this car was probably now going like 68. I realized that I was slowly gaining on him, and I was going the complete same speed on cruise control. This annoyed me slightly as I got closer and closer to the car, because I had not changed my speed, but he slowed down. I was wondering if the car would realize that I was gaining on him and speed up, but it did not. So then I switched lanes to go around him. I sped up, past the car, and then went back into the right lane when I was by. However, moments later, the car sped up and went into the left lane to get around me. This person must have realized that they had slowed down too much. So very quickly this time, the car passed me going much faster. It went a good ways ahead and then changed lanes when it was pretty far in front of me. I figured this guy was going to go faster this time and not let the same thing occur. At first, he was going at a good speed and way up the road, but then I started to slowly gain on him once more. This was really annoying. I was pretty sure that it was all on accident, because why would somebody intentionally do something like this? It was a pretty absent-minded thing to do. When I got like right up to the guy's bumper, after having not changed my speed at all, I had to go around him again. So I did. This must have really made the guy mad. I don't know if he thought that I was trying to race him or if he was trying to play games with me, because he started speeding up when I was in the left lane to pass him. I just said, okay then, and I moved back over to the right when he was in front. Then he did something crazy. He went into the left lane and started slowing down. I was still maintaining the same speed and in the right lane. Then I started to pass him because he slowed down so much, and I didn't know what he was doing. But then he sped up and then cut right in front of me. He left hardly any space. I couldn't just slam on my brakes and stop, so I nearly hit him. He went a little faster, but was driving really close to me. When he did this, I honked at him, as this was seeming to become a road rage incident. I didn't bother to switch lanes. I knew that the truck stop I was planning to go to was coming up just ahead, so I kept driving with the guy right in front of me. He went a little farther ahead, but not by much. Then when we got to the exit, I pulled off at the very last second to the truck stop. I saw the car slam on his brakes, but it was too late and he missed the exit. I didn't know what he was trying to do now, but I was glad to get away from him. So I pulled in and parked my truck for the night. Then I went in the building for a short time before returning to my truck to go to sleep. I got inside, covered my windows, and went to the back area where my bed was. However, not too long after getting back there, I heard the sound of someone banging on my door. It was very loud and persistent. I did not know who that could be. I got up and went over to the door. Before opening it, I looked out. There I saw some random guy. I didn't know who he was, but then I realized that he must be the driver of that car. He started yelling at me to come out and fight him like a man and stuff like that. I told him to go away. I had no interest in fighting that clown. After his yelling and banging on the door persisted, a few other truckers nearby started yelling at the guy because he was being really annoying. He eventually stopped and yelled at me some more, as well as the others who were annoyed with him. Then he stormed off and left. I could not believe it. The whole thing was his fault because he wasn't paying attention. Driving a truck is a lot harder than driving a little measly car like his, but he didn't seem to realize that. Back when I was in college, I had a scary experience that I still think about sometimes. It all started during my freshman year, first semester. This was towards the end of the semester, so a couple of months into the school year already. I was living in the dorms and living in a room by myself. It was a large dorm building with several floors, and lots of students lived there. The building was right in the middle of campus, in a popular place for freshmen to live. During the school year to that point, I thought that things were going pretty well. I would go to all my classes every day, was making friends, and having a good time. But I recall one night I was in my dorm room by myself doing some homework later at night. It wasn't super late or anything, but I remember that there was then a knock on my door. I didn't know who it was, because I was not expecting any of my friends to come over. I looked at my phone to see if someone had texted me or something, but there was nothing. So I got up and then went over to the door now, as whoever had knocked did not knock for a second time, and by the time I got to the door, whoever had knocked was now gone and there was nobody there. I figured that probably it was just someone at the wrong door, and I really thought nothing of it. However, just a few nights later, it happened again. I'm not really sure how close to the same time it was as before, but on this night I was in bed and going to fall asleep soon. As I laid there on my phone with all the lights off, there was once more a knock at my dorm room door. It cut through the silence as I shot up when I heard it. I walked over to the door then, only to find nobody there. By this time, I was thinking that it was possibly a prank. Maybe it was targeted at me, or maybe it was random. After all, I was in college, and this kind of stuff happens all the time. I knew some of the people that lived in my dorm, but I didn't really have any good guesses of who would randomly knock at my door late at night. However, these strange knockings continued. I think about a week went by before the next one, and then a few nights after that, once more there was a knock at my door, and when I got there, whoever had done it was gone. It was like the next night then, or maybe a couple of nights later, it happened once more, except this time I was sleeping and actually woken up from the knocking. That time it seemed to creep me out more than the others because of the fact that I was asleep. I didn't get up and look for a while, but when I did, of course, the person was gone. By now, I was wondering who was doing this and why. I didn't hear them knocking on anybody else's door. For example, there was another dorm room right directly across the hall from mine, If they knocked on both doors, I would have for sure heard the knock on the other door as well, and I might have even heard if they knocked on my next door neighbor's dorms as well, but each time it was just my door, and it was also just one set of knocks. They didn't knock for a second time or anything. It was a real mystery, but I still wasn't really that nervous. Over the next week, it happened once more, and once more it was late at night. I was getting annoyed by it, but I could never get to the door before they ran away, so I didn't know who it was. Then something crazier happened. I was in one of my classes, and it was right in the middle of it. Out of nowhere, there was a loud set of knocks on the classroom door. It interrupted the teacher, who stopped and looked at the door. He said something like, "That's weird, I don't see anybody there." And I remember that he then went to the door and looked, and saw that no one was there. He just said, "Oh well," and then went right back to the lecture. Everybody in the classroom thought that it was strange, but nobody really said much. I probably thought that it was the most strange, because I obviously remembered all the knocks on my door. Could this be the same person? And if it was, did they knock on everyone's doors, or did they know that this was my classroom specifically? It didn't happen again for the rest of that class period, but later that day, when I was in another class, it happened again. The class had none of the students from my other class that I'm aware of, so this was really odd. Once more, it was right in the middle of class, and the professor stopped teaching from hearing it. He went over to the door, but there was no window on the door, so by the time he got there and opened it, the person was gone, and he wasn't able to see who had done it. So then he just went back to teaching. By now, I was really creeped out by this, and I remember that very same night, something really crazy happened. It was late, and I was in my dorm room once again. I was going to go out to use the bathroom. However, as I was walking to my door, just before I reached it, I heard a knock right on the other side. I was already like a foot away from it, so I quickly put my eye to the peephole and looked out. I saw there for just a second a man who looked much older than college age right on the other side. He then very quickly walked away and was out of my sight. I was really freaked out. The whole time I'd been sure that it was some other college student that had been knocking on my door, but this did not look like a college student at all. I did not leave the room for a while because I was too creeped out, and then I was very careful when I did. Right after that, I reported it, and this was towards the very end of the semester. I remember that for a few nights after that, I stayed at a friend's place because I was so creeped out. Then when I returned to my dorm, nothing happened for the rest of the semester, and the next semester, everything was fine. I still wonder about that though, who that guy was, and if he was specifically trying to just mess with me. When I was in college during my senior year, I lived in a house with 2 roommates. They were my friends Sophia and Sarah. We had all known each other since freshman year, and our house was just off of campus. It was in a neighborhood that had many other houses. Some were college students, but many were not. The house that we lived in had 2 floors, and all our bedrooms were on the 2nd floor. The main floor was the living room, kitchen, dining room, and a bathroom. One night, I found myself at home by myself at maybe 9 p.m. or so. My roommates were both gone, and one of them was at her school job, and the other was studying, I believe, at one of the buildings on campus. I was just sitting in the living room and doing some homework while watching TV. The night was going pretty good. Then I heard someone trying to open the front door, which was locked. The living room was at the front of the house, so it was not that far away from me. However, all the windows were covered, so I couldn't see right away. But I was not really that nervous, because I instantly assumed that it was one of my roommates arriving back home. I fully expected her to then put her key in and unlock the door, but the knob rattled again, and that I did not hear anything like a key. I still thought it was one of my roommates, and I got up to walk over to the door thinking that maybe she had forgot her key. We were in college, and with all 3 of us living in a house and having classes and work at all times, we were always coming and going. When I got over to the door, I moved the blinds and checked out the windows before opening it, and when I did not see one of my roommates, but instead saw a random man who I did not recognize. His back was turned to me, so I didn't see his face or anything, as he was walking away. But he did not go back down the driveway. Instead, he was walking around the house, like he was either going to go next door or go into the backyard, and quickly he was out of my sight. But this suddenly made me very nervous. I had a bad feeling about this, and I realized that the back door to the house might not be locked. So I quickly sprinted through the house over there, and sure enough, it wasn't locked. Without hesitating, I locked the door and then moved away from it. The windows were also covered there, so I couldn't see out. But no more than 30 seconds after I locked it, I heard the man trying to open that door too. Now I was really freaking out. The only thing I could think to do in that moment was to run upstairs. I'm not sure why that was my reaction, but I guess that it felt safer to get as far away from there as I could. So I ran up to my bedroom, which was at the back of the house and on the second floor. That gave me a view of the backyard from my window and the area of where the man was. I moved my shades and looked out of the window. The man was still there, standing kind of by the back door and looking around. For some reason, being up there gave me some confidence. I now felt a little better about things, so I decided to tell the guy to leave. I opened up my window, and when I did, he looked up at me. We were now looking at each other, and I yelled at the guy to leave or I was going to call the cops. The man didn't really react. He didn't leave, and he didn't say anything. He just kept standing there and looking up at me. This really freaked me out, so I decided to call the police. I closed my window and then dialed 911 on my cell phone. I told them someone was trying to get into my house, and I was told that an officer would be on the way. I looked back to the window again though, and now the man was gone. I wasn't sure where he went or if he left, or just went to another part of the house. But when the police arrived, he was completely gone. I called my roommates about it too. We were all really concerned that the man would come back. For like a week we were paranoid, and we were always looking out the windows and stuff. However, the guy never returned, which I'm really glad for. The thing that creeps me out the most about the whole thing was his reaction. When I opened the window, he just calmly looked up and stared at me. I would think that most criminals would run off at that point, but this guy had hardly any reaction. This happened to my older sister when she was at college in San Diego. My sister and her friend were playing tennis off campus one night, and her friend decided to leave early to go home. My sister decided to stay a bit longer for whatever reason. Anyways, she packed up and started walking back to her car in the parking garage while chatting on the phone with her then boyfriend, who is now her husband. As she reached her car in the garage, she noticed that she had a flat tire. It was kind of odd considering that it had been fine a couple of hours ago, but nonetheless she wasn't too concerned. Her boyfriend offered to hop in his car and make the 10-minute drive to come by and help her repair it. As she sat there waiting for her boyfriend to show up, a man appeared seemingly out of nowhere, and she didn't notice where he had come from. She described him as a younger guy, well-dressed and well-groomed. They struck up a conversation, and after a couple minutes, he asked her if she needed any help fixing the flat. She politely declined and mentioned that her boyfriend was on his way to fix it. The guy said he really wouldn't mind helping her and that it wouldn't take long at all. Seeing how it was late and she wanted to go home, she gave in. As they began to walk to the trunk of the car to get the spare tire and tools, her boyfriend pulled around the corner in his truck. After he arrived, he got out and talked to my sister for a second, and he noticed that the guy who wanted to help was walking down the closest stairwell in a pretty quick hurry. They didn't think much of it at the time and went to the trunk and got the tools and spare tire. But when they got to the trunk, they noticed that it was not latched and was cracked open. They opened the trunk, and inside they found multiple ropes, a roll of duct tape, and some zip ties. None of those items belonged to my sister. They immediately called the police and started looking for the guy. The police showed up and talked to my sister, but they never found the guy. I still get chills when walking through parking garages late at night, even though I wasn't even there with my sister that night. I drive a refrigerated truck and deliver food and meals to different schools. My shift starts at 3 a.m. every day, as I have a lot of stops, and the food needs to be there at a certain time so it can be prepped or heated on time for the kids. One of my routes goes up to a small school on a hill outside of a village. The school itself sits off the road, and there are a few houses nearby, but not close enough to provide any light. I always get there around 4 a.m. There are no streetlights out there, so it's just my headlights out there as far as the source of light. I usually leave the engine running, so the beams hit the wall near the delivery door. Everything outside that cone of light is just black. That morning started like any other, as I parked, unloaded the crates, stacked them inside the side entrance, signed the sheet, and then headed back out. When I got back to the van, I realized that I needed to take a leak before the next stop. I stepped behind my vehicle near this area of tall grass and went down the mountainside for a while. Out there it's darker than you'd expect, and I was facing downhill while I stood there, looking out over the faint lights of the town miles away. You could see the sky clearly too, so I was watching the sky as I was peeing. As I was wrapping up, I lowered my head back down to my normal sight line. A figure moved across those distant town's lights, in front of me by less than 50 feet, as a head and shoulders had blocked the town's lights briefly. It pretty clearly looked like a head and shoulders, but I wasn't 100% sure, as I was hoping that it was something else. I wouldn't have been able to hear any footsteps or noises of the person walking around because of the truck's engine idling. I finished up quickly and started moving along the side of the truck, wanting to get back inside fast, heading for the driver's door. I didn't want to turn my back to whatever I thought I saw, but I also could barely see a few feet in front of me in that direction. I got in the truck, shut the door, and locked it right away. I shifted into gear and started to pull forward. As I did, I checked the side mirror, and once again saw a human figure near the back of my truck, slightly illuminated by my taillights. It confirmed I didn't imagine it. There was someone out there at 4 a.m. in complete darkness, pitch black, walking there for some reason. They had just passed a little bit in front of me initially, and I'm sure that they could see me clearly with the nose of the truck and the headlights pointed at the wall behind me. For some reason, this person followed me up from the grassy area all the way to the back of my truck, and peeked out at me for whatever reason as I got into my truck. I can't imagine a sane reason for anyone to do that. The holidays are coming up, so I don't have to deliver to that school for a few weeks, but I'm starting to dread every visit I must make there in the future. I recently remembered a really scary thing that happened when I was in high school. I was living at home with my parents, and I believe I was about 16 at the time. So I remember that my parents were gone for the night and I was at home by myself. At probably around 9 o'clock, our dog found me and then ran to the door, indicating that he wanted to go outside. When this happened, one of us would usually put him on his leash and then take him out into the yard. He was a small dog, so he would just do his business and maybe chase a squirrel and then go back inside. Sometimes we would let him roam around a little bit. So I took him outside on this night to the spot where I normally did. Our yard did not have fences, which was the main reason why we would always take him out on a leash. The yard also went right up to this road that was not the typical neighborhood road. It was a little bit busier, mainly during the day obviously, but it was a little bit higher up from our yard, and it had a speed limit of like 35, which is kind of fast for a street that you live off of. Plus, it was very narrow. There was like no space at all from the road to the yard, so it was a little weird, but I got used to it. Anyways, I took the dog to the spot in the yard that was kind of off to the side of the house but also in front of it. It was a quiet night by now. After being outside for maybe a minute or so, I saw headlights in the distance and a car then drove past. This was not unusual, but it always felt like cars were really close with how the road was to the yard. My dog still wanted to be outside and he was sniffing stuff and walking around, and I didn't mind being outside for a bit as it was nice out. So maybe a minute later, a car came from the other direction. This wasn't unusual until as it was passing by, I realized that it was the same car from before. Now that was a little strange, but still not the weirdest thing. However, maybe less than a minute after that, the car drove by again, this time a little bit slower. It was really dark out and the windows were somewhat tinted, so I could not see who exactly was driving. However, I didn't recognize the car at all, and it was a new-looking white-colored SUV. After driving by slowly, I saw it go down the street a short ways and then turn into a neighbor's driveway. By now, I kind of had a bad feeling about it. I wasn't sure if this person was just lost or what, but when I saw them starting to back up into a neighbor's driveway, I knew they were going to turn around and come back down the street again. I had enough. I decided to just go back inside. My dog didn't want to go in yet, but I tugged on his leash and we quickly walked back to the house. I got to the door just as the SUV was now starting to drive back towards our house. When I got inside, I watched from the window as it passed by very slow. But then, the car surprisingly turned into our driveway. As much as I had been maybe overly suspicious by going inside, I was now completely shocked to see this. I didn't really think that the car was going to go to our house. At that point, I quickly locked the door and then closed the blinds of it. I went into the living room and thankfully the other windows were covered. But I heard the sound of a car door opening and closing and I got really nervous. However, moments later, I heard the sound of the car driving away. So I was curious and I went over to a window. By the time I moved the blinds enough to see, the car was now gone and I didn't see anyone. So I was thinking and hoping that they left. I had no idea why they turned into our driveway, and I didn't know why I heard the door opening and closing, but I was glad that they were seemingly gone. I was actually starting to feel a little better about this whole thing. But then I heard the sound of a knock on the back door to our house. That sound made me extremely nervous and scared. I didn't dare go back there. Why would somebody be knocking on the back door? I went to the phone and I called my parents. Meanwhile, whoever was there knocked again. I told my parents that somebody was at the back door, and they said not to answer it and they would come home now. They said that I should call the police. So I got off the phone with my parents to call the cops, but at that point I no longer heard the knocking. It had stopped sometime in the 2 or 3 minute phone call with my parents. The person had knocked maybe a total of 3 or 4 times and then stopped. After not hearing anything now for a few minutes, I hoped once again that they had left. So I carefully made my way over to a back window and looked out. When I did not see anything. Of course, it was very dark out and there was also trees back there and stuff, but it made me feel better now to see that there was no longer somebody at the back door to the house, and I didn't see them anywhere else either. So I decided not to call the cops and just wait for my parents to get home. Things were fine for the next half hour or so. I didn't hear anything. Then my parents arrived back. They entered the house, and they said that when they pulled into the driveway, they saw a man running out of the backyard. When I heard that, it really freaked me out. That meant that whoever had knocked on the back door did not actually leave the yard. They were there the entire time. But when my parents got home, they finally left. My dad went out and looked around, but whoever was there was no longer in sight. They could have gone anywhere though. I still have no idea who was driving the car or who was in the backyard. It must have been 2 people if one of them drove away and the other then went into the backyard. But it was really creepy. This happened sometime around 2010. My friend Carly and I were both 18, and we went to a house party on the other side of town. By the time we left, it was around 2 a.m., and we'd both been drinking, but not enough to feel out of control. We decided to walk back to her place instead of calling anyone. It was about an hour's walk, but we decided that the air and the walking would help us sober up. The route was simple, mostly straight along the main road with streetlights the whole way. Even though it was late, we had done the walk before and it wasn't a dangerous part of town. For most of the walk, nothing happened. There weren't many cars out, but every now and then one would pass. When we were maybe 20 minutes from her house, I heard a semi-truck coming up behind us. That wasn't unusual for that road, and it passed us slowly, louder than everything else had been all night. Right after it passed, something changed. It's hard to explain, but 1 second I felt normal and a little tipsy, and the next I felt completely clear-headed and alert in a way that didn't match the situation. My chest tightened, and I had this strong feeling that we shouldn't be there anymore. I didn't know why I felt like that. The semi-truck had continued down the road past us, and nobody else was around, but I couldn't shake it. I kept looking back down the road, expecting to see something. Carly noticed I got quiet and asked what was wrong. I told her we should get off the main road. Up ahead there was a small side street which wasn't connected in a way where cars could turn on it directly from where we were walking, but there was a break in the sidewalk where we could cut over. I told her that we should head for that side of the street because something didn't feel right. That was when we saw the headlights of that same semi coming towards us. Somewhere ahead it had turned around and was coming back towards us on our side of the road now. It slowed as it got closer, but we had reached the side street and sort of jogged towards it as the semi slowed down. We turned back and saw that it stopped in the middle of the road and the driver's door was opening as the driver, who was a man, came down to the ground of the street. That's when our jog turned into a sprint as we made some progress about half a block down the side street before turning around and checking what the driver was doing. He had made his way out of the street across the sidewalk, and he was standing at the start of the sidewalk for the side street. It looked like he was going to call out to us or something, but he must have weighed his options and didn't want to leave his truck for too long in the middle of the street. He ended up turning around and getting back into his truck and driving away without chasing us any farther. That moment when the truck passed us the first time, there was no obvious reason to be afraid, yet somehow I knew, before anything had even started, that we needed to leave. I've had scarier things happen since then, but that's the only time I've ever felt something kind of like a warning, like something flipped a switch in my head and told me very clearly to run. This happened just a few months ago. I used to drive to this local park to go jogging there literally every day. I would not always go at the same time, but I would always make sure that I went. Many times it would be in the dark. I didn't want to be jogging alone in the dark, but with my work schedule, sometimes that was the only time I could go. This park had a trail that looped around the entire place. There was a large open field, a spot with picnic tables and a playground, and then a wooded area. I would parallel park my car on this spot right between the wooded area and where it gets more open. The street that I would park on would always be really quiet. I arrived at the park one night like normal. Typically when I would jog, I would have my workout headphones in and play music on my phone. So on this occasion, I arrived at the park after dark and then set out on the trail to jog. It was a nice and calm night. Nobody else was out, and I was going to jog 2 laps around the entire trail. This would take me maybe 30 minutes or so. So when I was on my second lap, I was jogging through the wooded section of the path and had maybe 5 minutes to go. That's when my music stopped out of nowhere. I wondered why. So I took out my phone while still jogging but slowing down a little bit. I saw that I was getting a phone call, and then I stopped completely. When I looked at the number though, I didn't recognize it. I ignored it and kept jogging. After the call was done ringing, my music went back to playing, and they didn't call again. I continued, and then I was done soon after, and I got back to my car and went home. Whoever had called did not leave any kind of message or anything. I didn't really give the call any more thought after that. But the following night, I was on a similar schedule. I went to the park at not the exact same time, but around probably the same time in general. I once more started jogging and was by myself. Now, when I was in around the same spot at the same time, my phone started ringing again. I could not believe it. To that point, I had forgotten about the phone call the previous day, but this obviously reminded me. I looked, and I couldn't say for sure if I recognized it as the same number as the night before, but it obviously was. I mean, that would just be too much of a coincidence for it not to be. I started to get this creeped out feeling, so I decided to answer the call. I pushed accept and then put the phone up to my ear and said hello. At first, there was nothing on the other end of the line. Then I heard a man's voice. He said, "I'm behind you." And that's all he said. I was standing there on the trail, stopped, and I asked who he was. He didn't answer. Then it clicked to me that maybe he was actually behind me, and I turned around. I didn't see anything though, but it was really dark out. I didn't want to take any chances. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds, then I quickly started sprinting the rest of the way, not jogging, but running as fast as I could. In this time, I didn't hear anything behind me. I still had my headphones in, but they were no longer playing music as I had paused it. I didn't look back because it would slow me down, and if I saw anything, it would really freak me out. I kept going, and what probably would have been 5 minutes of jogging turned into just a couple of minutes of sprinting. Then I ran out to my car in the street and got inside. Once I was finally there, I felt safe again and I locked my doors, and then I looked to the path before leaving. When I looked, I saw this man dressed in all black, including a ski mask, slightly emerge from the woods. He didn't come after me, but was just standing there looking in my direction. I was so creeped out. I quickly drove off and went home. I blocked the number, and I haven't been back to that park since. I used to work as an overnight shift tow truck driver. It wasn't anything intense, just sitting in a truck most of the night as the overnight calls for a tow were fairly scarce. When you were a driver on the overnight shift, you could either stay awake the whole time or catch sleep in your vehicle as long as you kept your radio at a high volume to wake you up if a call did come in. Most nights, I'd park near the front gate and nap in the truck. One night was no different as I reclined my seat, set an alarm on my phone, and passed out pretty quickly. At some point in the night, I woke up and I didn't know why. The radio was silent, my phone had no notifications, and everything looked normal. I sat up for a second, listened, didn't hear anything, and then laid back down. I figured it was just one of those random wake-ups you get sometimes. The next time I woke up, it was morning. My alarm was going off, and the sky was starting to get light. When I stepped out of the truck, I noticed dirt had been smeared along the side doors. At first, I thought that it was just from the previous day, but then I saw the marks on the windows. They were handprints. There were several handprints along the glass, on the driver's side, passenger side, and even on the back window. They were not my handprints, and I never touched the glass like that, so I stood there trying to make sense of it when one of the day shift guys pulled in. He parked, got out, and looked at me for a second like he was waiting for me to say something. I asked him if he knew what happened to my truck. He hesitated, then asked, "You don't remember?" I told him no. He said he'd come in at around 2:30 in the morning to grab his wedding ring he had left in the office because his wife was angry. and as he drove in, his headlights hit my truck. He thought that I was awake at first because someone was standing right up against the driver's side window. He said the person had both hands on the glass, leaning in like they were trying to see inside. He slowed down, thinking maybe it was me talking to someone, but then the person turned and walked away very fast, heading along the fence line before disappearing into the darkness. What bothered me wasn't just that someone had been that close. It was how long they might have been there, and what would they have done if my coworker's headlights hadn't lit up the lot. After that, I stopped sleeping in my truck. If I needed rest, I stayed inside the small office where the cameras were. At least there I could see what was outside. I'm usually a good sleeper, so the part where I woke up that night for no reason really has me question if it was for no reason at all. I might have woken up when someone was peering through the back or side windows watching me, and I had no idea. This happened years ago when I was younger and more immature. I was driving back home really late at night, something that I did more often back then. A lot more often than I should have. It was kind of a long drive for me that time, as it was probably about an hour and a half to get back home. It was really late at night, but I didn't have anything going on the next day, so that was good, and so I didn't mind it too much. As I drove on the highway, no other cars were really around. I wouldn't say I was in the middle of nowhere, but there wasn't a whole lot going on in that part. When I was driving, I was extremely tired. I had already been tired before I left, but I figured that I could make it back home without falling asleep. However, the more I drove, the more I just wanted to fall asleep. I had no caffeine with me, and I should have had some before driving home, but I didn't. So I found myself in a dangerous spot. I tried to continue, but I was really struggling to keep my eyes open. I knew that I had to stop, so I took the next exit. I told myself that I was just going to find the nearest rest stop or gas station, or really anything. I just wanted a parking lot, and I would sleep in my car for maybe 30 minutes or an hour or whatever, and then I would continue. I just knew that I obviously could not drive home in that state of tiredness. So after getting off the highway, I quickly realized that there was nothing there. I had taken some random exit that didn't even have any businesses at all. Too tired to go back onto the highway, I just drove down this road a ways, maybe a mile, and then pulled over. It was clear that I wouldn't be coming up on any gas stations or any kind of businesses at all. It was just a road that was completely quiet, with just woods and wilderness surrounding it. There wasn't any lighting at all either, other than my headlights and the sky. But there was some space on the side of the road with gravel and rocks, and then there was a few feet of grass before the tree line. So I pulled just off into the gravel and then turned off my car and put my seat back a little bit. Literally, as soon as I did that, I fell asleep. I was that tired. The next thing I remember was waking up with it still being dark out. As soon as I woke up, I heard the sound of someone trying to open the back passenger side door to my car. They were repeatedly trying the handle. I looked back, but saw nothing. I remember I was looking back there for like 5 seconds, but nobody was in sight. As dark as it was, I would have saw someone there. I was very quickly woken up though, and now not tired at all. I figured that this person must have been ducking down, crouched down on the ground, and was trying to open my door. I didn't know why or anything, but I knew that I needed to get out of there. So I quickly fumbled around for my keys, found them, snapped my chair back up, and started the engine. The person was still trying to open the door when I had the engine going, and I put my car into drive and left. I drove down the street a ways. I then realized that I was going the wrong way from the highway, so I turned around and went back past the spot. When I got there though, I didn't see anybody in sight. I soon got back to the highway and drove the rest of the way back home. I was wide awake the entire drive. I arrived back pretty late, but at least I was safe. I still don't know who was trying to get into my car or why. It was one of the craziest moments ever. I never saw who it was. A couple of years ago, I was living by myself in an apartment building. To give you a little bit of background, I'm a woman and had lived in the apartment for almost a year. It was a pretty decent place, as it was only a few years old and for the most part had no problems. At this particular time, I was working an office job on weekdays, and the office was a fairly large building with a few floors and a parking lot. It was close to the city, but it was kind of on its own plot of land, so it was more private. There was a large parking lot in the front, and then the building and grass around it. It had a small private drive that went up to it, so that's the basic background for the story. It really starts when one day I was at work and I left for the day to go home. I typically parked kind of in the corner, and the parking lot would never be completely full as people were there at all hours. But when I left, I saw there was a guy sitting at a small table that was a ways off in the grass. I had never seen him before, but I really didn't think much of it. I did recognize or know most of the people around the office because it wasn't that huge and I had been there for a while. There would obviously be some people that I didn't know though, but really I thought nothing of it. However, maybe just a few days later I noticed the guy again, except this time he was sitting in a car that was parked not too far away from mine. Once again, this was when I was leaving. I saw the man look at me and then look away, but I just figured that he worked there now and maybe he was new and that was it. But the next time I saw him is what made me suspicious. I arrived to work early in the morning. I parked in my usual area, and when I got out I was walking to the building and I noticed the guy. He was sitting in a car that was backed into another spot. However, the split second I made eye contact with him, I saw him duck down really fast and go out of view. I didn't know why he would do that. It was like he was trying to hide. This made me stop and continue to watch him because it was really peculiar. After a few seconds, there was nothing. But then he sat up part of the way, saw me again, and then quickly drove away in his car. It was really suspicious. I went inside to work, and I also realized that it was strange for him to be leaving at this hour. There were not too many people that would work all sorts of different hours like that. If I had seen him when I was leaving before, that meant he would probably work more normal hours, so why would he be leaving now early in the morning? That was another strange thing, and I told myself that I would keep an eye out for him going forward. After that though, I didn't see him for a few days. I was starting to forget about the whole thing. But then one day, I was arriving back home from somewhere at night. As I got up to my floor, I turned a corner, and I happened to see someone leaving their apartment. It was the same guy. He lived just down the hall from me, about 3 or 4 apartments down. I knew that it was him. When I saw him, I quickly turned back and went around the corner, and I don't think that he saw me. I heard him walking down the hallway, and I quickly went down the stairs until I figured he was gone. Then I went back to my apartment. I could not believe that the guy was living in my building, and just a few doors down from me. Did he work at my job actually? Or was he stalking me or something? For a few days, I didn't know, and nothing happened. Then I got lucky. Maybe a week later, I was leaving my place one morning, and I heard a door open down the hallway. I looked over, and I saw that it was the same place that one guy lived. My first reaction was to go back inside, but when I looked, I saw that it was not the same guy who was leaving. It was another guy leaving that same apartment. I decided to go ask him who the other guy was. So I walked over and said hi to the guy. I had never seen him before either. But I described the creepy guy to him and asked if he knew who I was talking about. The man said that was his roommate. He told me that he didn't know him that well, but they had been living in the apartment together. However, he told me that his roommate left 3 days ago and he hadn't heard from him or seen him since. He said he hadn't answered any of his texts or calls. I asked him if he knew where the guy worked, and he told me yes, but when he told me the place the guy worked, it was not my company and not anywhere near it. I told the man what happened, and he said that he thought his roommate seemed odd and that he didn't want to live with him anymore. Then we went our separate ways. I never saw either of those guys again. I'm sure someone else moved into that apartment. I still don't know the full story, but it sure seems like that guy was trying to stalk me. I currently work at a coffee shop. Something really crazy happened last year. It is by far the creepiest thing that's happened in my time working here, and possibly in my life. So it's a coffee shop in the city, and I live in the city as well. My apartment building is just a few blocks away. So this allows me to walk to and from work most of the time, which I enjoy doing. Well, I had a crazy couple of shifts at this particular time period. We were a little bit short-staffed for about a month, so the employees of the shop like myself and the others had to work extra. There were a few times where I would have to close the shop and then open it the next morning. When we opened, we always had at least 2 people working, but closing usually only just 1. This is because it's obviously much busier at a coffee shop in the morning than at night. We close at 7 p.m., so it's really not that late, and we open at 5:30 a.m. So working a closing shift and then an opening shift just meant that I had to get home and get to sleep. It was tiring, but not really that difficult. Plus, I would get out in the early afternoon when I opened. So, on this night I was working the closing shift. My coworker left at 5 p.m., and I was by myself for the final couple hours. I remember that for much of the 2 hours, nobody came into the shop. Then at one point, a man came in. He didn't say much at all, but he just ordered a regular coffee and I made it for him, and then he left the store. I noticed that after that, he stood around outside the shop. I could see him out the window. He was just standing there on the sidewalk facing the street and drinking the coffee. For the rest of the time that I was working, nobody else came inside. When we closed, I went over and locked the doors, finished up some things, and then left. Meanwhile, the guy was still there standing out front. After I got outside, I turned and started walking back from my place. When I was doing this, I heard someone start walking behind me. I glanced back and saw that it was the man. This gave me a bad feeling, because he had been standing around the shop for over an hour not going anywhere, but then as soon as I leave, he starts walking in the same direction as me. I walked home with this man seemingly trailing me by like 50 feet, so he was a good distance back, but at the time there were not very many people out. It was pretty much just us two on the sidewalk, and for much of the walk home it was just us, with the man remaining about the same distance back. I was nervous, but also looked over my shoulder here and there, and was glad that he was not seeming to be gaining on me at all. When I got to just a couple of blocks from my place, I took this shortcut that I knew. It went between some buildings and then around a corner of another building. It's hard to describe, but essentially it was several quick turns, where at the distance I was at, I would be out of sight from the man. I did this and then was able to quickly walk to my apartment. I did not see the man when I approached my building. I felt better and quickly got inside and felt completely safe again. I went home and just hoped that I would not see the man again. I didn't stay up very late obviously, as I had work again the next morning, so I had to be up at like 4. The next morning I woke up and obviously it was still dark out. I got ready for work and then left to walk there. However, what's crazy is that I was out on the sidewalk and walking to work. There I heard footsteps a ways back. It was the same guy. I literally texted my coworker right there and told her about it. At this hour there was also like nobody else out. I was so paranoid. My coworker was driving to work at the moment, and she said that she would come and pick me up as she was close by. I kept walking, and within 5 minutes my coworker pulled over to the side of the road and I got into her car. We drove the rest of the ways and then got to work. When we were inside, before opening the shop, we saw the man come walking by on the sidewalk. Feeling more brave now, without unlocking the door, we yelled at him to go away. Then we actually contacted police and filed a report. The man walked off and thankfully did not return. I think maybe he didn't know that I knew he was following me. Once he knew his cover was blown, he gave up. But I'm wondering if he just hung outside around my apartment all night. I think he did, because he was there following me right away when I left for work. That really creeps me out. Either way, it was pretty scary, and I hope that I never see that man again. One of the craziest and scariest things that's ever happened to me took place about 3 years ago. I had just recently moved to a new city for work, and I didn't really know much about it. I had never been there before, but within my first few months of living there, I got to like it. I've moved a few times, and when I live in a new city, I always go to all the hiking trails and parks that they have. Some are good, some are not, but I always try to find out which are which. So one night, I was going to a brand new park that I had never been to before. It had some trails and paths, and I went there after work in the later afternoon. When I arrived near the trailhead, there was a small parking lot where I parked my car. This park had a lot of woods in it, and the parking lot was sort of surrounded by it. However, nobody else was there when I arrived, so I figured that it would be a quiet hike. What I didn't take into account was the length of the trails at this particular park, as they were a lot longer than I recognized. So I started out and I went pretty deep through the woods, and then I turned into some open areas. I didn't see anyone, but I was enjoying it, until I realized that I was way out there and that it was starting to get dark. So at that point, I decided to turn back. As I went on the trail the way that I had originally come, it got darker and darker. Soon it was completely dark. It felt a little bit spooky to be out there alone at night. However, I knew the way back pretty well. After it being dark for a good 20 minutes at least, I finally made it back to the parking lot. I breathed a sigh of relief and got back to my car. At the time, I was driving this older crossover SUV. It had some problems and I needed a new car, but it actually ran pretty decent. So anyways, I got inside and began driving home. But right when I left, the warning dinged that I was low on gas, so I decided to stop. And it was probably about a mile down the road that I noticed this little gas station on a corner. So I pulled in and then parked at a pump. Nobody else was there, but the building was open. I got out of my car and went inside to pay for gas. However, right as I was getting inside the store, I heard what sounded like my car door opening behind me. This made me turn around. When I did, I saw a back door to my car was open and this random man was getting out of it. I froze where I was in complete shock and I continued to watch. This man then walked out of the gas station parking lot, across the street, and into the woods. I could not believe what I had just seen. I told the person working at the gas station that some guy had just come out of my car. I think he was almost as confused as I was though, because he hadn't seen it, so he didn't really know anything about the situation. So I ended up just paying for the gas and then I went back out and filled the tank. I looked in the back of my car and I kept looking at that spot of the woods to see if the man would come out of it. My car was empty now and the man did not emerge from the woods. But I realized that the guy must have been in there when I was driving. The back doors to my car didn't lock from the key remote that I had. They had the old kind of locks where you raise them to unlock the door and then push them down to lock it. And because my key thing didn't work, if the doors were left unlocked, you would have to physically push them down from inside the car, or else the doors would be unlocked. And to be honest, I never really paid much attention to it. I realized that my car must have been unlocked and the guy must have just walked right in. He had to have been in the far back of my car behind the rear seats though, or else I probably would have seen him for sure. But I was just glad that he was now gone. I went home after that. I was freaked out about the whole thing. I still am when I think about it. I was driving with some random guy hiding in the back of my car. It makes me really glad that I stopped for gas. Why the guy left my car, I'm not sure. Perhaps he thought that I knew he was there and I was going into the gas station to get help. That's my best guess. I don't think that he just wanted a lift from the park to that section of the woods. What his real intentions were with getting in my car in the first place, I really don't know. This happened back in 2012, and I was 20 at the time. It was my second semester of college, and this was just one of those days. I just really didn't want to go to class, but I still wanted to be productive. So instead, I skipped class that day to go to the local bookstore and coffee shop that was on my campus. I was looking forward to a quiet morning sitting in the cafe with a cozy cup of coffee and a sandwich while working on an art project on my laptop that was due for class at the end of the week. I brought my laptop in with me and then I found a spot to sit after I got my drink and breakfast. The first hour went by completely undisturbed. Then a guy sat at the table across from me. I'm always hyper aware of my surroundings, so without looking, I could tell that this person wasn't sitting with a book or food or a drink, and he didn't just pull out a laptop or even pull out his phone to look at it. He just sat there. I never looked directly at him, only using my peripheral vision to notice those details. Even still, I ignored him at first, deciding that maybe he's waiting for someone or even waiting for an order. So I continued my work. Well, this guy still didn't move, and no one joined him. No order came either. He didn't start reading a book or his phone or messing with a laptop. He just sat there at the table across from me with his hands on the table. I got the sneaking suspicion that he was only sitting there to watch me. So rather than looking up towards him, I looked past his shoulder towards the front doors of the shop, once again using my peripheral vision to see more clearly. And he wasn't just looking at me, he was intently staring at me. There was nothing casual about the stare. It looked hyper-focused and intent, but a bit glassy. Alarms went off in my head, but I tried to ignore him and went back to what I was doing. This guy just continued to sit and stare at me. He never said anything and never tried to get my attention or ask for it. My palms were starting to sweat, and I couldn't concentrate on my work anymore. I wanted to get out of there and get as far away from this guy as possible, but I knew I couldn't just get up and walk to the door into a remote parking lot where he could hide behind cars. I shut my laptop and slid it into my backpack. The guy continued to not move across from me. I zipped up my backpack and pulled it over my shoulder as casually as possible and then headed for the restrooms. But I didn't go into the restroom. Instead, I turned in the book aisle beside the restrooms, and at the last minute I ducked into it and weaved behind a few others. I looked behind me and I spotted the guy at the end of the aisle, and when he saw me look back, he staggered and quickly ducked behind another aisle. That's how I knew for sure I was being stalked. In hindsight, it might have been safer for me to loudly call him out and drag everyone's attention to him. And looking back, that's probably what I should have done. But I was young and I was scared and I wanted to get away from the guy. Besides, if he left the store after a commotion, he'd probably be waiting for me somewhere outside anyways. So I spent a few minutes going through the aisles of the store, sometimes very quickly just to make sure that I lost him, and then I left the store with my keys in my hand. As soon as I was in my car, I locked the doors and pulled out before heading straight home. As I sped down the street, I saw him emerge from the store and look around the area frantically, but he had no idea what car I was in. I was just so relieved that I escaped the guy. I'll never forget the way his eyes looked though. There was something just really creepy about it. I've never seen anyone else look like that, and I hope I never do again. This is something that happened a few years ago. Sometimes I have to move around for my job. At this time in particular, I was working in a new city and got a smaller house to rent there. I would be living by myself, and the neighborhood was fairly busy with many other houses. They all had pretty small yards, but it was a decent place to live. It was close to the city and didn't seem dangerous or anything. I was enjoying it for the first couple of months. Then, one night, I arrived home from work pretty late. It was about 10 or 11 p.m., as sometimes I have to work later or longer shifts. When I arrived home, everything was normal and fine. The neighborhood was quiet and it seemed calm. So I drove into the driveway, parked my car, got out, and went inside. I was inside the house for no longer than a minute when there was a knock at my front door. Now this was really strange obviously because of how late it was at night. Plus, I had just gotten back home. So I walked over to the door and looked to see who was there. But I went to a window and looked out of that instead of just opening the door to see who was there. When I did, I saw a man who I did not recognize just standing there. He was wearing a hooded jacket, and I was pretty sure that he wasn't one of my neighbors. But even still, why knock on someone's door at this hour? I wasn't going to answer it. I moved away from the window and walked deeper into the house, hoping that he would just walk away and leave. The guy knocked again though. I still did nothing. But then he knocked again for a third time. I hoped by now that he would think that nobody was home, or get the hint that nobody was going to answer. But with the fact that I had just recently arrived home, I wondered if he had seen me. Was this just a coincidence, or had he followed me, or had he been watching my house or something? Did he see me go inside? I didn't know why, but that's just a thought that came into my head for some reason. But I wasn't answering the door. Surprisingly, the guy just kept knocking. And he didn't knock any louder or faster. He just knocked the exact same way, over and over again. He would knock, wait like 30 seconds to a minute, and then knock again. After a long time of it, I was still in the other room, and I didn't know what to do. I could try to tell him to go away, but I didn't know if he was dangerous or something. Possibly there was an explanation, and nothing was wrong. It seemed like the longer I didn't answer, though, the more I could not, and the more it creeped me out, too. It wasn't like he was desperate for me to answer the door. It was more like he was just going to keep knocking for the longest time. After he was still knocking for like 15 minutes straight, I was completely creeped out. I even considered calling the cops, but I didn't think there was anything illegal about knocking on someone's door. Looking back now, I guess it could have been trespassing or something like that for him doing it such a long time with nobody answering. But in that moment, I didn't think of it. Still, I was debating it. After literally probably like 20 minutes of knocking on my door, it finally stopped. After he didn't knock for a couple minutes, I went over and looked out of the window, and he was now gone. And also, I noticed no car nearby, so I didn't know where he had come from. I stayed up a while longer and checked out of all the windows and stuff and didn't see him. Soon after, I went to bed. Now, that night, I was awoken at 2 o'clock in the morning. When I woke up, the first thing I heard was someone knocking at my front door. The guy was back, and he was knocking at my door again. And he was knocking in the exact same way. He was just calmly knocking on it, waiting a bit, and then knocking again. I was so creeped out. But this knocking didn't last long. He was only there for about 5 minutes this time, and then stopped and left. I was pretty creeped out still, though. Thankfully, he did not come back that night, and I never saw him again. I don't live there anymore, but I still wonder what the story was there. I never saw him prior to that or after that. So was he a neighbor? I don't think so. Did he follow me home or watch me return home? Maybe, but I don't know. I still wonder what he would have said or what would have happened had I answered the door, but I'm also glad that I didn't. A couple of weeks ago, the power went out in my apartment building. It didn't storm or anything, but I guess a power line broke or something, and the company had to come out and fix it. Anyways, we had no lights or anything in my apartment, and this was in the early afternoon. Unfortunately, I work from home, so I could not get any work done. I couldn't really do anything. There was no power and no Wi-Fi. So I decided to go to a coffee shop to get work done for the rest of the day, or at least until power was restored. I drove to a local spot and then went inside and took out my laptop and started working. This was a good idea because I was now able to continue with my work from the coffee shop. In fact, I ended up working later than usual because I knew that if they didn't fix the power, I would not be able to do anything when I got home. I stayed at the coffee shop until about sunset. They were still open for another hour or so, and they were also pretty quiet, so I was good to continue working there. However, I then saw an email on my phone from my apartment that said power restored. So when I read that, I packed up my stuff, left the coffee shop, and drove back home. I arrived back at my apartment, and it was now just after sunset. When I walked in the building, the hallway lights were still dim like they had been before. I was confused. I got to my place and opened the door and walked inside. All the lights were off still. I felt around for the light switch and turned it on, but nothing happened. The power was still out. I took out my phone to try to use the flashlight, but when I was doing that, I heard sound from somewhere in my apartment. Before I turned the flashlight on my phone, I heard somebody quickly approaching me. They were coming from deeper in my apartment, but I couldn't see anything, and they were quickly getting closer. I stopped what I was doing and tried to make sense of it. I lived alone, and nobody else should be there. I couldn't see anything though because it was pitch black. Then, the next thing I knew, someone partly bumped into me. They hit my shoulder, and I nearly fell to the ground. Then I looked over, and for a split second, I saw someone, but I couldn't tell any details about them with the darkness. Then the person ran out of my apartment and closed the door behind them. When they left and were going into the hallway, I saw them a tiny bit better, but still not good. After the person had gone, I went over to my door and locked it, and then looked through the peephole, but they were gone. I didn't know what to do. I was so confused. Why was the power still out, and why was some random person in my apartment? I looked at the email again that I got from my apartment, and I realized that I had read it wrong. It did not say the power was restored. Instead, it said they were working on getting the power restored. For some reason, all I saw was power restored and got excited, I guess. I'd simply misunderstood. I finally got the flashlight on my phone going and looked around my entire apartment. As far as I could tell, everything seemed to be in place and fine. But I still didn't know who had been in my apartment or why, or how they even got in. The power was out for about another hour before it finally turned back on as it was restored. The person never came back. I realized that if I hadn't gone back home when I did though after misunderstanding the email, who knows what could have happened. Did I scare the person off right after they entered my place? I'm not sure, but I'm just glad that they left. This is something really weird that happened not too long after I got my first job. When I was 17, I got a job at Walmart as a cashier. I was young and I had never had any kind of job experience before, so I didn't really know what I was doing very well. I don't remember a ton from my first shifts, but this happened on what I think was my third or fourth time working there. As a cashier, I would work mostly in the afternoon until sometime at night. So on this night, it was getting later, and I would be getting off of work soon. To that point, it had been a pretty average shift as far as my memory goes. Things were a little bit busy earlier, but then it got quieter and quieter the later at night that it got. As I was approaching the end of my shift, I had maybe half an hour left when a coworker approached me. She came up and asked me when I was off, and I told her that I was off pretty soon. She then told me that when I had about 10 minutes left, to leave my check lane and go to the back room and pointed over to it. She said that she needed help with something and it wouldn't take long. So I told her okay, and then she left and I stayed at my checkout. I had never seen that woman before, but there were a lot of coworkers at the Walmart that I had never seen, as the stores are always very big. So things were quiet for the rest of my shift. With 10 minutes left, I did what I was told. I turned off the light to my checkout and then I walked to the back of the store. I didn't know what I needed to help with, but I didn't question it. Being new to the job, I was willing to do whatever they asked, even if I was just hired as a cashier. So I went to where I thought I was supposed to go. There were the swinging doors to the back room area, and this was in the back corner of the store kind of. It was quiet over there, and when I got in, it looked like the typical back room. However, I didn't see anyone. I took a few steps in, and then I heard the same woman's voice. She called out my name, but she was way farther down, and I could not see her. I said that I was there, and she told me to go down by her. I honestly could not see the woman at all, but if you've ever been to a Walmart back room, I'm sure some are different, but most of them have boxes everywhere and they have sort of their own little aisles. It was all organized, but not as clearly and presentable as on the sales floor, and there's lots of other random boxes and equipment around. I could tell that she was in the far back, but I couldn't tell exactly where. I started walking and she yelled at me, "Over here." I turned and started going towards her. I made it maybe 20 feet and I still couldn't see her. That's when I heard the door open behind me, the same swinging doors that I had just gone through. I looked back and saw a man there who also worked at Walmart. He too I had never seen before, but he asked me what I was doing. I stopped and I told him that I was asked to help with something back there. He came over to me and he asked me by who. I didn't know the woman's name and I told him that. He looked confused and he said that he didn't know who that would be. Then he called out asking who was there. This time though, there was no response. We walked farther up and then we heard someone walking away kind of quickly, but they were still out of view. When we made it kind of around the corner a ways up, there was an exit door that was sort of propped open. I remember the guy saying he figured whoever was there had left. He opened the door and looked outside, but didn't see anyone. He then told me that he worked in that area in a department, and he said that they didn't need help with anything. He told me that as a cashier, I probably would not be asked to help with anything back there anyways. So I was told that I could clock out and leave, and he would try to figure out what was going on, and so I left. After that, I never heard anything more about it. I don't know what that woman was up to or who she even was. She probably didn't even work at the Walmart, and looking back, that was really weird. I'm a truck driver and drive semis all over the country. I'm still fairly new to the job, but I have already had a really creepy experience. This took place several months ago. It was nighttime, but not that late yet. I was on the highway and had been driving for a while. The roads were not bad, but there was a decent amount of cars on them. I use a CB radio while driving like other truckers, so I've talked to the other drivers on the road before. On this night, the highway was kind of windy, but it was a road I had not been on yet, so I was not familiar with it. As I was making my way, I heard someone mention me over the CB radio. I was not sure as to who it was. I didn't recognize them, but I answered it. When I did, a man told me that up ahead on the road there had been a crash, and it looked like the road was going to be blocked for a while. He said that he advised me to take the next exit if there was one up ahead. Then I could find a way around the spot and then get back on the highway, because they would not be moving anytime soon. I responded and told him thanks for the heads up. I could not see that far up the road, but it was apparently a ways up, and also the road had curves in it. My map was not showing a slowdown, but I figured that might be because it had just happened. So I looked to the right and hoped that there would be an exit before this crash. And very shortly after that, I saw one. So without hesitation, I took it. When I pulled off the highway, I saw that there was a very quiet-looking road, and that was it. There were no visible gas stations or rest stops or anything, not even houses. It was just road and wild land. I was hoping to find a road on the left of this one because that was the direction that I needed to go, or I was at least hoping that this road would curve to the left, but it didn't look like it was going to. When I had made it maybe a quarter of a mile down the road, I had not seen any other connecting roads yet, but I saw something else. There were several men who walked out a ways in front of me from the side of the road. They were now standing in the center of it. I had not seen them until they walked right out into the road because it was so dark over there, but these guys just walked up and started blocking the way. I obviously had to slow down, and I had no idea what was going on. As I continued to slow, the guys just looked at me. This was a bad situation. When I had finally come to a stop, one of the guys came up to my driver's door. I opened the window a little bit and looked down at him. The guy told me to get out, and I asked why. He did not tell me why, but he just told me to get out again. The other guys were just standing there. I asked the guy who he was, but he didn't answer me. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't just turn the truck around. It was too large. I decided to just take my chances and drive forward. I hit the gas, and my truck slowly started to move. As I went forward, I got lucky as the men jumped out of my way so I didn't hit them. I kept driving down the street, and I called the cops eventually and reported what had happened. Then I turned on another road which had a spot that I could turn around on. After I was able to go back, the men were not at the same spot anymore. Maybe they were just hiding in the woods though. But I merged back onto the highway, and when I went up the road, there was absolutely no crash or anything, not even a little bit of a slowdown. I realized that it might have all been a trap. There had never been a crash or any kind of traffic jam. The guy probably told me to go down that road so that they could stop me and do who knows what. I'm just glad that I got away. I remember years ago I went to visit my sister in college, as we're basically best friends. I was walking to her dorm room in the dead of night at 2 o'clock in the morning after finally parking my car in a remote lot. You see, she attended a college that was far away, and I had had a long plane and car journey riddled with bumps in the road only to arrive so late in the night. The campus was empty because of a recent ice storm that had pretty much frozen everyone in, and it had affected my travel as well. I was carefully walking alongside the road, trying to avoid slipping and falling down. After a few minutes of walking, I located the entrance to the dorm. As I was texting my sister to come down and let me in, the blue and red lights of a flashing police car caught my eye. There was no siren, but just the lights, as the cop car slowly pulled by the curb, and a police officer stepped out. Nobody else was there, so was he here for me? Did I look suspicious, or homeless, or like a lost girl due to my backpack? Or maybe he was checking up on me due to that. However, he walked up to stand near me but said nothing, seemingly waiting for something. I clutched my phone, feeling the slight anxiety of a police officer turning his lights on. I was confused in the moment. Finally, I asked, "Hi, can I help you?" When I did, he said, "I'm looking for a girl that went missing in the area. What's your name and what are you doing here?" I felt stupid for a second and then said, "Oh, sorry, my name is Rachel and my sister's coming down to get me." He said nothing and just kept standing there. The whole scenario was very awkward, so I tried to make some small talk. I said, "So someone's missing on campus? That's awful." I wondered if my sister could know who it was, so I asked what the girl's name was. The officer said, "Her name is Rachel, and you look like her." I responded saying, "What a coincidence," getting more freaked out now because of how the cop just stood there in silence. I caught the welcome sight of my sister coming down the stairs. She buzzed me in, and I realized that the officer was coming into the dorm room with my sister's buzz too. I was a bit confused as to why the officer couldn't open the door earlier if he had planned on going into the building. I would think that maybe he worked for the college and would have keys to the building. After greeting my sister, I yelled out, "Good luck," referring to the missing girl, to the officer. He had already begun to walk away though, and there was no acknowledgement in return as the guy slipped past the stairwell and into another area of the dorm. It was so strange. We ran up the stairs, and I locked my sister's door behind me. I explained that the cop was looking for a girl who had gone missing on campus, and asked my sister if she knew any other Rachels. She said no. After settling into the couch, I Googled it. I started to shake when I came across an article of a local cold case with the picture of a missing girl who bore no true resemblance to me. It was a small town, so there were no other similar cases that I could be getting confused with. She really didn't look like me, and another strange thing was her name wasn't Rachel. The officer had said her name was Rachel, and he had said that I looked like the missing girl. I'm extremely weirded out by the whole incident, and I'm not sure what to believe. To this day, I'm still uncertain about the whole situation, and I'm wondering if he was even really a cop. Back when I was a kid, I would sometimes be left home alone, but not often. One time, though, I was about 10 or 12, and my parents and brother were gone, so I was left home by myself. It was the evening time, and my friend who lived a couple of blocks away asked me to hang out. I told him that I could come over, but technically I was not supposed to because my parents were gone. But we agreed that it was not a big deal as long as I was home before they did. So I didn't tell my parents, and I decided to go there. My friend had really cool video games that I didn't have, so that was a large factor in me going over there. The only problem was that I did not have a key to the house. But I figured it wouldn't be a big deal, because our neighborhood was pretty quiet, and nothing ever really seemed to happen. So I left the house, and I didn't bother to lock the front door, and then I walked to my friend's. I went over there, and we played video games for a few hours. I knew that my parents and brother would probably arrive back home at around 9:30 or 10. So at about 8:45, I left my friend's house to go home. The walk home was fine. It took maybe 10 minutes. But when I got to our street and was approaching the house, I did notice one thing out of the norm. There was a single car parked on the side of the street across from the neighbor's kitty corner to us. It was a car and I didn't recognize it, and it struck me as odd because cars would rarely park on the side of our street there. I continued walking home and got to the house and then went inside. As soon as I started walking in the house, though, I heard something. It was footsteps coming from out of view across in the other part of the house. Right away, it gave me a bad feeling, but I pushed the bad feeling away and I thought that my parents must have gotten home without me realizing it. I was more so worried in that moment that I would get in trouble for being gone when they arrived back home. But then I went over to the window and looked out to the driveway. There were no cars in it, so they weren't home. And nobody said anything when I walked in the door. That gave me a terrible feeling. Someone else was in the house. For some reason, my first thought was to run and hide behind the couch in the corner of the room. I did that and then put a blanket over myself. Maybe 30 seconds later, though, I heard the back door to the house open and close. I stayed there and didn't move. Then, maybe 30 seconds after that, I heard a car door open and shut out front. This made me want to look because I wasn't sure if it was now my parents. I happened to be by the window, so I uncovered myself and glanced out. I then saw that car that had been parked across the street that I had noticed driving away. Some random person had been in the house. I didn't get a look at the driver with it being nighttime. I just saw the car driving away. I then got up and looked around the house to find that nobody was there. Nothing was stolen either, which was weird. I locked the doors and my parents got home a short time later. It was a terrifying experience and I'm just grateful that I'm okay. This happened almost 5 years ago. It's something that I still think about sometimes and wonder about. I'm someone who really likes the outdoors, and all the time I go hiking or even just walking. I like to be out in nature and go on paths in the woods, through parks, or really anywhere. One time I went walking at this spot about 10 miles away from where I live. I was by myself, and the park was very quiet. Nobody else was really there as I went later in the day. In fact, it was the evening time. But it didn't really seem like it was that busy much over there anyways. There were a number of walking trails, and I set off on one sometime before sunset. Soon it got dark out, and I really didn't mind walking at night that much though. It might seem a little weird, but if you know your way around, it can be more peaceful, I think. But anyways, when I had been walking for like an hour, I was pretty deep into the trails in the woods. As I walked down a straight part of the path, I thought that I noticed something off of it in the woods. It was like a light. I didn't know what it was, but I was curious, so I stopped and looked over. When I did, I couldn't quite tell what it was because it appeared to be much deeper in the forest. It was probably at least 100 feet off the trail. So I took a few steps off trail and into the woods. It was not that thick, and it was walkable without getting weeds and branches all over you. So I decided to just keep going to see what the light was from. I walked through the forest, getting closer and closer to the source of light. When I had made it a little ways in, it appeared as though it was some kind of building or structure. I at first thought that it was a cabin. Whatever it was still right smack in the middle of the woods. I almost turned around and started walking back because I figured somebody was probably in it or I shouldn't be there. But then I saw that it was not just some random small cabin in the woods. It appeared to be a coffee shop. But this was so weird because it was very small and right smack in the middle of the forest. I walked closer and saw that it had a sign on it that said coffee. To paint the picture, there was one yellowish tinted light atop the building. The structure itself was sort of like a wooden cabin, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. There was then a door and a couple of windows, and it appeared as though it was a coffee shop where you would just walk up to the window and not actually go inside to get the coffee. And there was absolutely no path going to it. It was just right smack in the middle of the forest, and trees surrounded it on all sides. It was so random and weird to see there. I got right up to it, but nobody was inside. I tried the door, but it was locked. I looked in a window and could see inside, though the lights were off. There appeared to be supplies in there, and it looked like the shop was actively in use, just was closed at the moment. I was amazed by this, because it was a really cute-looking coffee shop. But also, why was it here? It's pretty strange to have a random coffee shop in the middle of the forest. Nevertheless, I looked at it a few minutes, and then walked back to the trail. I then went back and left. When I got home, I wished that I had taken some photos of the coffee shop, and I still do. I don't know why, but the thought to do so just never entered my mind. I told a friend about it, and she thought that it sounded really odd, so I decided to take her there and show her. We went there during daytime. However, when we got to the spot and went into the woods, it was not there. The whole building had just vanished, and I'm sure that it was the same spot. I was so confused, as this was only a couple of days later after I had first seen it. I even went back like a year later, and it was still gone. To this day, I wonder about that. This happened when I was a kid, about 12 years old. At that time, I lived at home with my parents and my younger brother, who was 10 at the time of this story. Our house was one level with a basement and in a pretty typical neighborhood. We had a front yard, a backyard, both of which were not that large, but enough space to hang out and do stuff. So one evening, it was about sunset and getting dark. My little brother had just gone outside a little bit earlier. He was always running around playing sports and was really active. My parents were in the living room, I think, which was at the front end of the house. And then I was in my bedroom, which was at the back end of the house. I had a window that looked out to the backyard, except I was sitting at my desk and doing homework facing in the opposite direction. As I was there in the middle of my homework assignment, I heard something hit my bedroom window behind me. I didn't even bother to look. I figured that it was my brother either throwing a ball against the window or messing with me. He would often do stuff like that. A few minutes later, it happened again, and I still didn't look. But then maybe a minute after that, I heard a knocking at the window. This was annoying, so I decided to turn around and see what my brother was doing. When I turned around, though, I saw that nobody appeared to be there at the window. Now, I didn't turn around and look immediately when I heard the noise. It was a little bit delayed. It was also dark outside, but I would have seen my brother if he was right at the window. I didn't really think too much of it still, because I figured that my brother just walked away, and so I turned back around and continued my homework. Probably less than 30 seconds later, I heard the front door to our house open and close really fast. Then I heard my brother yell something, and I heard my parents' voices. I couldn't make out what they were saying, though. My brother then ran down the hallway and stopped at my bedroom door, which was open. He then told me that he saw some creepy guy in our backyard. I could not believe it. I asked my brother if he had knocked on my window, and he said no. I realized that it must have been the creepy man that he was talking about who had knocked on my window. We both went to the window and looked out of it, but we didn't see anyone, and it was also really dark back there. Our dad went outside and looked for the guy. However, he came back in a short time later, and he said that he didn't find him and he must have left. My brother went on to say that he had been in the front yard. Then he went around back, and as soon as he got in the yard, he saw some guy standing near the house, and he was standing sort of near my window. So it was not my brother at all causing those noises at my window, but some random man. That really gave me the creeps. My brother must have scared him off because he left right after. I was paranoid for several days, but the man never returned that I'm aware of.